today is better than yesterday, and tomorrow's going to be better than today. And so I'm grateful that I live right now. I don't live 100 years ago, and I don't live 100 years from now. I live right now, and now is the time that we're going to change what that future looks like. And that's an incredibly powerful thing to be part of. And I'm just grateful that I'm here, I'm with you, and we're doing great things.
What an inspiring quote from Amanda Leland, Executive Director at the Environmental Defense Fund. I'm your host, Karan, and in today's Zenergy Podcast episode, Amanda talks about her EDF journey spanning over 2 decades, the launch of MethaneSAT, which is a game changer for being able to track methane emissions, and how they're navigating the current political roller coaster. Plus, Amanda shares career advice and future breakthroughs she's buzzing about. Stick around for the lightning round. It's a blast. Hope you enjoy this chat with Amanda Leland. Hello, Amanda. Thank you so much for joining the podcast. It is a privilege to have you on. And to kick things off, I want to start by asking you about your secret for staying at an organization for such a sustained period, which I feel like is relatively rare these days. What inspires you on a daily basis about your work at EDF, and how has that passion evolved over the years?
Well, first of all, it is a true honor to be here with you, Karan. Thank you for inviting me. And thank you for creating this space where people in this community, in this sector, get a chance to connect with you and the audience. So a lot of gratitude to you.
Kind of you.
Yeah. So your question is a good one, and one that I think about every day. It is a long time to be in an organization, 20 years. I just, in June of this year, celebrated my 20th anniversary at EDF. In that time, I got married and had kids and, became a full-blown, the adulting thing. Mm-hmm. It's a long time. And the reason why there's actually a couple of reasons why I stay. One is impact. EDF is extraordinary in what it has been able to accomplish. And if I'm going to spend my precious time doing something, I want to make sure that I'm able to put my time and energy into something that's actually going to change the world. And that's a big, bold statement. No one person can change anything themselves. But EDF provides the platform and the team and the vision that actually does achieve way more than you would any rational person should expect from an organization like ours. Mm-hmm. So number one is impact. The second is the people. There's a pretty consistent review of EDF. People come for the mission and they stay for the people. It's a big family. Mm-hmm. I've worked with some of the most amazing, thoughtful, caring, tenacious advocates I have ever met, who always keep doing what's best and what's right at the top of the agenda, and are able to speak truth to power in all kinds of circumstances to get the job done. And it's so motivating, and it's really an incredible organization and people that drive that possibility.
It's amazing. And when you started at EDF, did you envision that one day you would ultimately become the executive director?
No, so actually my story with EDF starts back when I was 13.
Wow.
I was a paying member to EDF. In 7th grade, my science fair project was about recycling. I was really obsessed with recycling because there was so much trash. And back in the days that I was in 7th grade, which was a long time ago now, on the news every night was these stories about these tankers filled with trash that were floating around the East Coast and never able to dock and unload, in particular in New York City, and what to do with all this garbage. And I said, we have to stop the garbage problem. And I became infatuated with it, did my science fair project around it, researched all the organizations doing something on recycling, and EDF rose to the top. So I started becoming a paying member of EDF when I was 13.
It's meant to be.
It is meant to be. And when I started as a staff person, which I never really thought there was a career in environmentalism, to be clear, like I sort of avoided that for a while. And then I realized that after going through my science degree and I worked on Capitol Hill briefly, that the best thing I could do with my time would be to try to ensure that the world could be better off. And I didn't want to be a scientist that was documenting things that were going bad. I wanted to be on the side of solutions. And so I've had like maybe 10 different jobs in my 20 years here. And every day I learn something new, and my schedule is different and it's constantly changing, and I am never bored.
That's amazing.
Yeah. It is pretty amazing to think about that arc.
And usually I save the advice questions for the end, but I don't want this interview to end without hearing your perspective. So if you were able to go back in time and let's divide it in tranches. So if you were able to give a piece of advice to yourself as you were just starting out at EDF, and then another piece of advice to yourself when you were 7 years into your journey, and then 15 years into your...
Okay.
So three pieces
of advice. Woo, okay. So starting out, I think my advice would be to do more networking in the sector. Networking isn't the thing that I wake up in the morning and get excited about. I'm really a solutions sort of impact person. Not that I'm not a people person, right? But I think about networking really as how to drive towards outcomes. And I think where EDF and where in my own career I've been most successful is where I've built really deep, long partnerships with other people, because no one person can get the job done. So I think if I could give advice to myself 20 years ago, it would be like, really just do it, even if it can be challenging. It's really important. And
network internally or externally?
All
or
of
both?
it. All of it. Yeah. I think if you fast forward, what was the next time? Was it
7 and
7
then 15?
And 15. Okay, 7 years.
General ballparks.
Would definitely be, don't take yourself so seriously, Amanda. I think, when you are in motivated by your work and you are driven to results, sometimes you can start to take yourself too seriously. And I think it's hard for people as they advance in their career to keep recognizing that, fun and being rewarded in your job is really important. This is the advice I was giving to myself, and I think I'd stick to that advice, which is be willing to take risks. As you move through an organization and do different things, and your platform shifts and you have more opportunity to drive change within an organization, being willing to take risks that are going to better position that team and that organization for results is really important. And in the nonprofit sector, it's not common. So I was giving myself advice to take risks then and be a driver of change. And I think that was sound advice and is paying off.
Amazing. Thank you for providing that advice. I'm glad we got to it before this interview ended. So EDF has tackled some huge environmental challenges over the past 2 decades. And I'm curious to hear whether during this time there have been any aha moments or turning points in terms of how EDF approaches tackling these types of challenges.
Definitely. There are a lot of them. 2 that I think really are worth speaking to. One is it's really important to meet people where they are. Don't bring yourself to their problems. Help them figure out how to solve their problems in a way that's going to make their lives better. And we're much more likely to see results when it comes to climate and environment. And we can talk more about that.
Yeah, I would love to hear an example on that.
Yeah, so much of my career at EDF was focused on our fisheries work. And a big part of that was fixing the management system in fisheries and building better science and infrastructure around it that would enable fishermen to become conservationists of the ocean. And at that time when we were doing this, it was a heretical idea. Like nobody thought fishermen can actually be the people who can lead the charge on protecting the oceans. And when instead of environmentalists telling them what to do, or environmentalists telling the regulators to come down harder on the fishing communities, we worked with the fishing communities so that they could get a stake in the health of the ocean. And then it became in their economic interest, in their community interest, in their social interest to see fish populations recover. And that was in the US, it has really moved the needle. I can't say it's changed everything because now climate change is shifting where fish are in the oceans, and but the reality is that when you engage with communities and stakeholders directly and help them and support them in a way that's going to make their lives better, environmental progress happens and it's durable. So that's thing one. I think the other aha moment has been around the importance of thinking big and being bold in the solutions. And in particular, we recently launched a satellite.
I saw that. That is so cool.
It's called MethaneSAT, and MethaneSAT will track global methane emissions. It is now circling the Earth. And in probably the next few months, there will be publicly available information on a regular basis, on a near real-time basis, so that anybody can hold polluters accountable and move the needle on reducing methane emissions. And that's helpful for government policy. That's helpful for industry that's trying to do the right thing. That's helpful for advocates like us to ensure progress is made. And being bold is taking the risk of thinking that an organization like ours could conceive of, partner with others to build and deploy, and then be able to communicate and track these commitments from companies and governments to make a difference. And that has really changed the nature of the conversation on methane globally. But also, I think it's going to make a big difference on impact.
That project was launched right before our trek to EDF.
I love that you did a trek to EDF.
Where we met with a few teams there. And it was just so interesting to learn about the satellite, and love to hear about the genesis of the project, how it all came about. I mean, it's a massive project to launch a satellite. You can track the methane emissions of different plants all across the world, I think.
Yep. Global.
So how did that idea come about, and what were the steps from idea generation to ultimately getting it launched? Assume is probably a pretty big endeavor.
Yes. Well, I haven't been involved in all the steps, to be clear. We have a really smart team of amazing experts and partners who are amazing experts. And it would not have happened without them. Really getting the instrument developed in a way that's going to track and break a lot of scientific barriers around being able to track methane emissions where they're mostly happening. And what we know now is that most of the methane leaking from the oil and gas sector is small leaks that are consistently happening rather than the big leaks that become the newsmakers. And MethaneSAT is finely tuned to be able to track those smaller but consistent or persistent leaks. So we can actually know where those leaks are and characterize them. How big are they? How much is emitting? Which gets us to solutions. And a big part of being able to make change isn't just being able to talk about how bad the problem is, right? It's about working with companies and building an ecosystem of industry that supports the solutions that are required to fix the issues in the oil and gas fields. And the seemingly intractable problems became tractable. And now we know that you can address methane, and it's going to address a lot of the warming we're experiencing today at little to no cost. It is a huge potential game-changing opportunity, and it's a necessary step on the journey on climate change.
So was it a few years?
Yeah, so it played out, I would say, probably over 7 or 8 years, not a few. And it was a big, bold, ambitious idea.
Mm-hmm.
We had to raise the funds to support it.
Yeah.
We had to help bring together the experts that could build it. We had to we were lucky to have satellite experts on the team who could help us navigate. Like, EDF is not an organization that was developed to think about what's the permitting the process by which you launch a satellite into space, or how do you insure it?
You can't just Google that.
Or no. So there's a lot of intricate and important details that go into building something like this. And at the end of the day, it's really about the advocacy that's there to support it and we expect it to be very impactful.
Mm-hmm.
And we're really leaning in on that advocacy component.
Which brings me actually pretty nicely to an article that I recently read of yours where you wrote, "I strongly believe the world cannot meet the climate crisis without engaging with everyone in a position to cut climate pollution." And
yes.
regarding how this ties into the methane, because there are a lot of stakeholders who might be able to, who might not have had direct awareness into the exact emissions of their plants, and would love to get a sense of like some best practices you have found when it comes to engaging with stakeholder groups who might not necessarily have a climate bend.
Yes.
To put it nicely.
Yeah. Yeah, so that goes, I'm so glad that you brought that up, and I had forgot that I had written that, but it does sound like me.
Because you put out so many articles.
Yes, prolific. Thanks to a team that helps me do that, right? It's a lot to juggle in my life. But this goes back to a point I was making earlier about it's important to meet people where they are, right? I care about and I do my job because I want to make the future better. I want to make the planet better. I want to do whatever we can to address climate change. That's our charge, and it's a big part of our mission at EDF. That doesn't mean that everybody who can make a meaningful difference on the problem that I care about needs to care about it the same amount that I do. They might care about something else, but what they care about might align with what I care about. So this is very basic, but it's really important in how advocacy can be successful. And so when you think about methane, EDF works with oil and gas companies, and can be a very uncomfortable position because we work with anybody who's willing to make change on the issues that matter and do so in a credible way. We are 100% focused on credibility and accountability. And if a partner doesn't hold up what we believe is their end of the relationship and the reason we're working together, we're not going to stick around. But addressing methane is the best and most near-term opportunity we have to curb global warming. You better believe we're going to be in it all the way and do whatever we can with willing partners, and doing so in a way that's going to help them further sort of meet them where they are. So a company has natural gas leaking or methane leaking through its infrastructure.
Which they probably want to know about too.
They want to know about that. They can actually recover that, right? And that there's value to that product for them. We want the leak to go away, so do they.
Interesting.
So we can co-design solutions that are going to solve that leak problem. And that is better for everybody on the planet.
100%. Very cool.
Thank you.
Very, very cool.
It is, it's an interesting and fun dynamic when you can find partnership with unlikely and different types of people.
Okay, so shifting gears slightly to leadership. And EDF has thousands of people who work across the globe. And I know you travel a ton in your current role, as you were mentioning a little bit before we started this conversation. Have there been any leadership lessons that you've learned through interacting with such a diverse group of employees, different cultures, any learnings that you have found to be particularly insightful in your journey as a leader of such an international organization?
Yes, there are many, and I'm still learning. This
Mm-hmm.
is going to be a lifelong journey for
Mm-hmm.
me. And EDF has about 1,000 staff.
Got it.
I just want to make sure that that's clear. We have about 1,000 staff, and we have people. We have 4 big investment regions. So we have the U.S., Europe, India, and China. Just so to put things in perspective, and then
That's
we
helpful.
have smaller teams in other places like Japan or Mexico. And so we do have a very diverse team, and local representation and local leadership is paramount to that. So the head of the person who leads our India work is Indian. It's really important, and the team there is Indian. It is very important that there be local leadership and representation because it's the people who are local who are going to know the cultural context and have the relationships and understand how to move the needle in the places where they live and work. So that's really important. At the same time, from an organizational leadership perspective, they need to have a seat at the table in how EDF as an organization is running and the decisions that we make. And so one of the things that we work really hard now to do is ensure that we have alignment across all of our senior team around the world about what our priorities are and how do we deliver against them. So very tricky issues come up in the context of solving for climate change because it's all the things, right? It could be around energy deployment. It could be around food and water and the toll on people. And we want to ensure that we're speaking with one voice consistently in every place that we show up. And so our local leaders, our regional leaders are showing up as part of the decision-making of the organization as a whole. And this has been personally for me a very big priority in the organization, and it has helped us be much more successful.
So what have been some specific tactics that have helped you find that alignment across?
I mean, some of them are very basic, which is that we all have to meet and talk on a regular basis.
Like how regular?
So the very regular, weekly.
Weekly.
So, or maybe I think we're shifting to bi-weekly right now because the pace has been a little breakneck. But which also means we can't all show up to meet on U.S. time. Like a very specific decision is around managing time zones. Because if it's always the people in India who have to sacrifice their time to be on a phone or in a meeting at the same time that I'm there, it's not fair. So we operate a weird sort of 24-hour cycle, which is not fair for, I get that there's real implications for that in our work-life balance, which is a whole other topic. But it's really important that we think about how to make it possible for people to show up and do their jobs when we're operating a global organization.
Yeah, it's such an understated point. And I remember someone who was leading the COP negotiations gave us a talk where he was mentioning one of the most challenging parts of the job was figuring out time zones. And he would literally sleep in like 4-hour increments because he'd be speaking to the Eastern Hemisphere in one meeting, and then a few hours later he would have to constantly shift, align his schedule according to the different time zones, which before that conversation I didn't fully appreciate. But
yeah, so I was in China a couple months ago, and I had several meetings stateside that I couldn't change. So I was up in the middle of the night. I slept for 3 hours. I was up in the middle of the night do a couple meetings, and I slept for a few more hours, and then I did my full day. The climate is a global problem. We operate a global platform. We have a global team, and we have to think about how do we meet people where they are.
During those periods, like how do you operate from an efficiency standpoint, mental health standpoint? Like what are some things that you do that you've found to be helpful for yourself, even when you're like not sleeping that much?
Yeah, so I have a very tightly honed strategy of when I travel and how to not get jet lag. So that's one thing. I'm happy to impart my wisdom.
Do.
Really?
Please do.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is very personal. No, I mean, not in a bad way, but As soon as I get on the plane, I adopt the time that I'm going to. So like I get on the plane at my local airport and I mentally switch so that I'm in the time zone of where I'm going to land.
Got it.
And then I exist on the plane in that time zone.
Got it.
So I might get right on the plane and fall
yeah.
asleep if it's nighttime there, or I might, have dinner or whatever. I also avoid screens.
On the plane?
Yes.
Why is that?
Everybody else is subsumed by the TV's right in front of you. You get to spend all your time watching all those cool movies you can't watch other places. For me, my brain does not shut off as well if I'm subjected to screens. So I take a actual hardcover book or an actual book, and I read a book on the plane. And it allows me to not get tied up in my own head. And I take a melatonin to sleep. That's it.
Got it.
And then I get up when I land, I'm on their time zone. And when I come home, I hit the ground with my family, which is just as chaotic as my work life, and off I go. So it works.
Pro tip.
It works. Pro tip. Yeah. So there's that. The other thing that we have done at EDF, which I think is really important, is give people more time in the summer. So we do Fridays off for part of the summer. We do half Fridays, and then we give the entire global staff off. We shut the organization down the last week of August. And that gives everybody a chance to do whatever they want in that time. Nobody has to be on call for anything. The whole organization shuts down, and it's really refreshing. For me, it works out where it's the week my kids go back to school, so I'm able to be there for them, get them on the bus, make sure they have what they need. But for other people, they take big trips or they spend the week at home, kind of doing the staycation and getting ready for September, which is always very busy in our world.
Very cool. Thank you so much for expanding on that.
Yeah.
You mentioned you read books on the plane.
I do.
I was going to ask you a question regarding leadership and whether there are any books that have helped shape your perspective on leadership, either climate specific or also generally.
Yes. So I default to the Patrick Lencioni books. I don't know if you know these books, but one very famous one is called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. There's also, I think, 3 Signs of a Terrible Job, and he's got a whole series of them. But what 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, we use it a lot over and over again, reminds people is how if you set yourself up and your closest partners at work in sort of set up for success, there you can achieve great things. And teamwork is really what it's all about, and building the norms that enable that team to be successful, given a whole lot of chaos or difficulty, which is what every senior person faces in their job. So I always recommend 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. It's not maybe one that you would have thought about because there's a ton of great climate books out there. There's a ton of nonprofit impact books out there. I love those too. But at the end of the day, being successful is not about me, and it's not about you. It's about you and I working together and being productive and being able to have us working together be more than the individual parts.
In that book, were there any insights that might have been counterintuitive to you at first?
Well, one of the subtexts is don't judge a book by its cover, meaning like when you meet your colleagues and get to know them, try to understand what motivates them and work towards enabling their motivations too in a way that's going to help the team be successful. And you might not realize what those motivations are or how they engage when a difficult situation surfaces. And so really get to know them and find that path forward.
I'm going to read that.
It's worth reading. I will say that the lessons from it are more impactful than the reading of it. It's important to read.
To apply it.
Yeah, but think about it. Think about it in your context of who you work with on a regular basis or who you want to work with. I often dream about if I could pull together the world's dream team on solving this problem, who would it be? And by dreaming that, you can visualize what characteristics you're looking for in your partners.
Interesting.
And it creates more possibility for you to get there.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Definitely going to look into it.
Excellent.
For their recommendation.
Yeah.
Shifting gears once again.
Yeah.
So, of course, we're in an election cycle. And
yes, we sure are.
Maybe too exciting of a time, some might say. But over your 20 years, you've been through many different political shifts, both domestically, also internationally. In terms of navigating the uncertainty of the times, are there any key learnings that, reflecting like through the past several election cycles, you feel like people could apply today? And also, how do you feel like the elections, if at all, are going to be impacting EDF's near and long-term objectives?
So EDF has a sister organization, EDF Action, which is a political advocacy organization. So just to be clear, there's EDF and EDF Action, and both have been planning for various outcomes of the U.S. election. So thing one on what we're doing, what needs to happen is scenario planning and actually know what the strategies might be under different outcomes. Being caught flat-footed is not a good idea because we have incredibly important work to do. I think, there's a potential where there's a divided government, politically divided government in the U.S. after this election. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. If I did, I would be pretty excited about it to know what's going to happen. But an expectation that there will likely be a divided government. And so it's important to think about what can happen, like what is possible in that context. And climate is going to continue to be a top-tier issue. A big part of that is going to be protecting the incredible investments that were made in the Inflation Reduction Act, also known as IRA, a couple years ago. And because that's infusing funding into companies, projects, governments all over the country to drive a clean energy and transportation future, which is essential. So protecting that is a big agenda item under any scenario and any outcome. It's going to be important. And I think you talked about the global aspect of this, which is I'm glad you brought that up. This was the biggest year of elections globally.
Wow.
And if you look through like what's happening in other places, it's also an incredibly important story. There's been a big set of elections in Europe and European countries, India, the biggest democracy in the world, Mexico. You can sort of tick through what has been a amazing year of elections. And I think we will see that climate and trade is going to continue to be at the top of the agenda as nations work bilaterally in the coming years. And so my hope is that the elections that have happened have positioned climate in a better way going forward, but I think that we'll see whether that's true or not. There's a lot to be excited about, but we'll see.
To summarize somewhat, the EDF team has different scenarios according to their perceived outcomes of the election and assign a probability to those scenarios and then have different...
Yeah. And then we have different plans that we will implement under those different scenarios.
Got it.
And we work with partners and our board and others to define what those scenarios and those plans look like. It's a very active process, and we want to be ready for whatever happens. And I think the other thing to keep in mind here is that the EPA in the last year put out really important new rules for climate and clean air. Really important and really driving progress in reducing climate emissions, like gigaton scale emissions reductions through EPA actions in the last year. And EPA, in my view, should be thanked for their leadership on this, including the administrator, Michael Regan. It's really important that the progress in implementing those rules, which has extraordinary support from business to communities, happen in the next years. So we need to continue the progress being made by EPA. And that's a consideration under different election scenarios and how the Supreme Court is currently operating.
Got it. So what would you see as EDF's role in that?
So we work with businesses to weigh in around some of the establishment of these rules, get their voice into the mix, demonstrate how their businesses could be better off. We do this for public health too, a lot, being able to quantify and demonstrate the reduction in childhood asthma cases or the life-saving qualities of these actions. So that's a really important piece of this too, the analytics and sort of the scientific support, the case for why these rules are important. And that will extend all the way through their implementation and any judicial challenges that they may face. And to help ensure that they're implemented well, we'll be continuing to work with the agency and work with partners to ensure that they have what they need to be able to implement them. And again, a lot of that comes down to technical advice and support that we can give, and problem solving, actively problem solving where there might be an implementation challenge. What are some of the solutions that could help bridge that challenge and move things forward? On implementation of one last thing on this, which is not so much about the EPA rules, but the big investment made by IRA with the Inflation Reduction Act and the huge climate investments. A really big piece of that puzzle is getting infrastructure built to deliver green energy to the people. And so we're working really hard on helping to enable that part of implementation to be successful. And it's difficult. It's difficult. There's a lot of reasons why.
It's such a massive initiative.
Well, because there's a lot of governance involved. You've got decision making at the local, regional, national scales. You've got concerns about where the infrastructure is going to be sited and how does it, what's happening, what does it look like? You've got it's a lot of steps. It's kind of the really important but unsexy part of climate action. And so EDF is really leaning in there. There's also a lot of misinformation out there around infrastructure.
When you think about the future, what is one development or breakthrough that makes you say, I can't wait for this to happen?
Okay, can I actually give you three?
Yes.
That may be overperformance on the answer. But in the long game, I hope fusion happens. Can we all just hope that fusion actually happens, right? But I'm not going to hold my breath for that. I'm supporting and cheering for them in hopes that actually comes to fruition. It's a really important thing to, development to be had. In the nearer term, going back to this infrastructure problem, I hope that we can make real progress. This is a real strategy on reconductoring. That's the geekiest word ever. But basically, it's using infrastructure that already exists and enabling transmission lines and infrastructure to be put on top of it. It totally short circuits and fast tracks some of the need, and because this is stuff that's already there. So reconductoring, totally geeky, really important. And even in the shorter term, MethaneSAT data. In just a couple months, the world is going to be able to see these data, and we're going to be able to see the size of the problem, which is likely to be large, and the huge opportunity we have to make progress on it.
That's going to be transformative.
Yes, it will be. Hugely transformative.
Hugely transformative.
You should consider having someone back on the podcast for when those data are flowing.
When is it expected? You said a few months?
In a couple months.
Okay.
I would say by the first of the year or maybe a little after that.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. So I have one question on oceans.
My favorite thing.
I had to. Yeah. I could not have.
Are you going to ask me what I would be if I lived in the ocean? I love that question.
I'll save that for the lightning round.
Okay.
Seriously, that's a really good question on the lightning round. So you've spent years at the intersection of ocean health and climate solutions. What is the coolest or most unexpected way you see the two worlds colliding in terms of whether there are any transformative solutions in the near term that you think could really help improve ocean health?
So increasingly, it's becoming apparent that, well, we've known for some time, but the results are happening, that the oceans are warming, in many cases faster than the rest of the planet. It's having a huge impact on the wildlife that lives there and the people that depend on the oceans for livelihoods. That is happening, and it's shifting a lot of global dynamics. Fish are moving from the equator to the poles in search of cooler water. So that's a huge dynamic. At the same time, and we all, science, we've known that the oceans are absorbing more CO2 than any other part of the planet, right? But it's possible that they could do more, and they could be more a part of the solution set on climate change. So there's a lot of work around natural climate solutions like expanding seagrass beds and mangroves and other things that could help move the needle on reducing climate pollution, sequestering climate emissions, if in effect. But there's like a whole new field around technologies that could be deployed in the ocean that might enable the ocean to do more of the sequestration. They're not well proven yet. They're still in a development, they're in the development phase. But I have hope that some of them will come to fruition, and because we need more solutions on climate. And a key to that is going to be ensuring that there's social license to deploy these technologies. The scientific hurdle is one thing. The measuring, monitoring, evaluation is another thing, which is important. So like tracking what's happening when they deploy a technology. But fundamentally, if people don't believe that these technologies are going to help the planet and not hurt the local communities, they're not going to be successful. So I think it's really important to both build the scientific case and ensure that there's the social license to deploy.
Kind of to your previous point of bringing in the fisheries.
Exactly.
And having them participate in the solution.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, on a more serious note, if you were one fish, if you got to choose any type of fish.
Oh, fish. Yeah. So I usually choose a sea urchin, but that's not a fish. That's an invertebrate.
Okay. Well,
but a fish. Let me see. I think I would like to be a damselfish.
I don't think I know what that one is. But...
So they're very cute coral reef species. Uh-huh. They're small and they garden. They actually create their own little garden around the coral. And I'm a very avid gardener. Uh-huh. I have a big garden in my backyard. It's kind of my passion project. So I think I would be a damselfish.
Wow.
You'll have to go look that up now.
That sounds super cool and interesting. And a good transition to our lightning round.
Okay, lightning round. Here we go.
If you weren't in this career, what would you be doing?
Oh, well, I'd be a superhero. Is that a career? Can I do that?
I think so.
I'd be a superhero, and I would use my really pointy elbows to get things done. I'm serious. I have I have super pointy elbows, and people always talk about people with pointy elbows.
So you just point them at
someone, like I would just jab the bad people out. That would be that's what I would do.
That's a great superhero power. If you could have dinner with any historical figure, who would it be?
Oh, this is a hard one. I have so many answers, but I just read a book and it has actually changed my life. So I have to go with this historical figure, which is Thomas Jefferson's eldest daughter, Martha Jefferson Randolph.
Tell us more about her.
Well, I mean, I've only read this one book, but she had a very difficult life. And I think it's important to realize, I think about this every day of like, today is better than yesterday and tomorrow will be better than today. Sometimes I feel like we lose that perspective. And she faced a lot of difficult situations and navigated them and is underreported and undervalued in the historical record. And so anyway.
What was the book called?
It's called America's First Daughter.
Cool.
and how she basically takes the place of a first lady as the first daughter,
Got
and
it.
all that entails. And it is heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. Yeah.
So
I didn't mean to be on a downer there.
Mantra? No, that was uplifting.
My mantra is put one foot in front of the next and keep going. I have trained myself in this mantra.
Really?
Yes. Personally, I've had a lot of personal challenges in addition to my, work life. And the only way to go is forward.
So keep one foot in front of the other. Focus on the next.
Focus on the next step. Don't try to always solve everything all at once. Make incremental progress. That's what is sustainable.
Do you have a morning routine?
Oh, you don't want to know my morning routine. My morning routine is like, be as present at home as I possibly can, which is, driven by family, kids, our new dog.
That's great.
Yeah.
Oh, your new dog?
We got a dog.
What type of dog?
He's a golden retriever with some distant poodle.
Oh, sounds super cute.
Yes. He's meant to be a companion for my daughter who's handicapped. Yeah. And he's very cute.
When did you get him?
2 weeks ago.
Wow.
Like he's brand new.
Amazing.
Yes. And he's very kind.
We got to flash a picture of him in this interview.
His name is Bowie. Like
name is
like floats on the water.
Amazing. Amazing. Best advice you've ever received?
The best advice I've ever received. Yeah, don't take yourself too seriously. I actually going back to the earlier part of our conversation,
Such
when I was
important
saying
advice.
this advice to myself, it was actually someone else who said it to me in that time frame. And don't work too hard. Like, oh, here's another really important one. This is very U.S. context, but know when to accept C-level work. This is part of don't taking yourself too seriously.
What does that mean exactly?
You don't always have to produce the A+ product.
I see.
Know when to put your effort into what's going to make the biggest difference, and when you need to deliver the A+, and when the C is just fine to get you by.
Got it.
And that is for every overachiever out there.
Yeah,
which I'm sure that anybody listening,
perfectionists out there,
people listening to this podcast are overachievers. I'm sure.
Trying to learn.
Figure out when you need to be at your best and when you can just get by.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And finally, to conclude what has been an incredible podcast, thank you again for taking the time. Really enjoyed speaking with you. When you look at your life, what's the one thing you're most grateful for, and how does that gratitude show up in your work at EDF?
I love that question. I could answer it in several ways, but I think I'm actually going to go back to something I already said. Is that fair?
Definitely.
Which is, today is better than yesterday, and tomorrow's going to be better than today. And so I'm grateful that I live right now. I don't live 100 years ago, and I don't live 100 years from now. I live right now, and now is the time that we're going to change what that future looks like. And that's an incredibly powerful thing to be part of. And I'm just grateful that I'm here, I'm with you, and we're doing great things.
Thank you so much. I'm super grateful that you took the time today and shared all your insights. Thank you, Amanda.
Karan,
Seriously.
it has been an absolute delight. Thank you again for inviting me.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. And thanks for doing this and being part of the future of this work.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks for...
We need you.
It's great to have people to inspire the next generation, and you're surely one of them. So thank you.
It's very kind of you to
for all
say.
your work in the space.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's
it.
I really, really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for checking out the Zenergy Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to rate and subscribe to the podcast. It would mean so much to me and the rest of the team. We release episodes every Thursday, so stay tuned for all new episodes featuring industry leaders building a cleaner, greener future for us all. See you next time.